It goes by saying that 2024 was a big year for Atlus. Persona 3 Reload finally releases after years of speculation that it's going to happen. Shin Megami Tensei 5 finally got the re-release that it deserved. But there's one game coming out that year that is probably more important than both those games combined.
And Metaphor still holds that title of being Atlus's most important game till this day. The only issue is that I barely see it be any relevant than any of the other Atlus games in their backlog that isn't Persona. So what happened exactly?
Now, I know it seems that I'm touting this game as a failure, but I'm actually not. The game sold 1 million copies day one, which is actually a big thing for Atlus that year, since most of their games have been selling in the millions. The only issue is that with Metaphor's case, it's slightly different. I just feel like going into the specifics about why Metaphor has been kind of in the back burner for the past year or so, even though this game has been widely regarded as one of Atlus's best. So I guess that only raises one question. What happened to Metaphor? Why does nobody talk about this game anymore?
Here we go!
After Persona 5 was breaking records in Japan back in 2016, and oh my god, wait, that was 10 years ago. Announced back in December of 2016, Project Refantazio was going to be Atlus's next big RPG. The Triforce of the modern Persona series, Hashino, Meguro, and Sojima, are at the helm of this project. This, in of itself, has already painted a very pretty picture for the future of this game. But as the years went on, we barely hear anything about it. Only little snippets that it's happening, it'll happen at some point, it's gonna happen. People thought that the radio silence from Atlus meant that the game quietly got cancelled as the years went on. It was only until the release of Catherine Fullbody in 2019 where people remembered, oh, this game exists. Sneaking in 2 unreleased songs from at the time titled Project Refantazio, and they didn't even have a title on them, so very clearly that game was still in development. I know Atlus has been doing this behind-the-scenes footage of Metaphor Refantazio at least once a year during development. The thing is, they have such a consistent schedule of releasing games at the time that many people didn't even realize these videos were coming out. So once the development cycle ended in 2021, we didn't get news until 2023. After Atlus West committed an oopsie on their social media, I guess Atlus decided, well, we gotta surprise them somehow, right? And lo and behold, Project Refantazio was retitled to Metaphor Refantazio during the Xbox Showcase in 2023.
I mean, this is huge! I don't get to look at concept art Hulkenberg anymore! See, I, like many others, was excited for Persona 5 Tactica and Persona 3 Reload, but obviously Metaphor was the biggest thing ever. I mean, we finally get to see it! Now, when does this game release? Oh.
Let's give him a fight!
Yeah, I don't know if you picked up from the chart earlier, but this game has been released in a year where SEGA blew their load out on all fronts when it comes to their most popular IP. Hell, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance has been announced and released that same year. The only game in the entire lineup that is brand new is Metaphor. Now, I'm not saying this is a hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby situation with what happened with Soul Hackers 2, but don't you think after 8 years of on and off crumbs of news on this game that this would be a big deal for fans of Atlus? It did release the same month as Sonic X Shadow Generations, which I don't think heavily impacted the sales, but I do believe this game deserved to be pushed to 2025. However, this raises a problem for Metaphor. Hey, me from the future here. So Atlus West and Expedition 33's official page on Instagram posted a bundle of these 2 games being sold together on Steam, which is so funny to me considering that I actually talk about these 2 games in this next section. So, if you are somehow watching this video and not have played either of these games, I genuinely do not know why you're here. See, a little game called Clair Obscur came out last year and shook up the RPG landscape in a similar way Persona 5 did back when it came out. Though, with the current world climate when it comes to entertainment, Clair Obscur is a lot more accepted than a game that I'd say Persona 5 is. Hell, the Persona 5 series is already a tough sell for people, so what makes you think that a fantasy game like Metaphor would make it any better? The average person already thinks RPGs are boring. To have that release alongside a game that exploded in praise when it came out, Metaphor unfortunately would have been buried in comparisons to this game, and to add some fuel to the statement, the game has already been compared in many discussions about RPGs and how Metaphor has already been outdated. I do think it would have been a slightly better call to push this game to 2025, because then you'd have it released alongside a remaster or a money laundering scheme. Yeah, comparisons are going to happen, but I would have rather had Metaphor stand on its own than be buried with the other Atlus games that year, which admittedly seems more interesting to other folks than most. Regardless, Metaphor would have had a tough battle staying relevant in the public eye. Sure, that's how I got my Goat Luis as an acrylic coaster if I got the Refantazio Fizz.
It's just blue ramune with ice and whipped cream.
In the end of the day, they're both incredible games, regardless if one released first before the other.
I don't know, Nico. The way you're talking about these games makes it seem like Metaphor is still relevant, but where is your point? I'm already getting bored. Please get to your point already.
I'll get to it!
We have the edge.
I've been yapping for so long about the outside nature of this game, but I haven't talked about the main course yet, which is the game itself. If it isn't obvious already, I absolutely love this game, and I think it's one of Atlus's best games up there with Shin Megami Tensei 4, Persona 3, and Devil Survivor Overclock.
Yeah, I went there. My word is law.
Only time will tell where I stand on an overall ranking, but Metaphor has always been one of those games that pops into my head every once in a while, and I tend to absolutely gush over it whenever I get the chance. A common phrase I hear when it comes to many Atlus games, especially from folks I know, is how I already heard this before. See, I get it. When it comes to consuming media every day, there's bound to be a limit of things you find original. Metaphor is one of the few cases I feel like an Atlus game immersed me into a world that is so closely connected to ours, a reflection into humanity's destructive nature that we build upon. The reason I more so say this is due to the fact that I, and many other people on their first playthrough, were a little confused as to why you needed to put your name twice until you realized you were meant to put a name for you, the player, and the protagonist. That connection alone is a great reminder that you, the player, have a role in this not as John Metaphor, but as yourself. This was made very obvious in the game's early marketing and intro scene that involves many shots of modern-day society. The game, in a sense, mirrors our world, which is why I applaud the attempt of making the player a prominent thing that is talked through throughout the game. I always found this game to be on the higher end of the smarter Atlus game totem pole when it comes to its execution of its themes. One word alone keeps popping up as the game goes on: fantasy. Is it referring to how this game is of a fantasy setting, or is it asking us, the player, to see beyond what it would commonly be seen as impossible to become reality? The book our protagonist carries around throughout the game, which is often shown to other characters, is referred to as a fantasy novel that, when looking at it inside, is just the world outside our window. Allegedly. A civilization with hope, equality, peace, and prosperity where people flourish as one and not limited to the confinements of what this case would be fantasy. This, however, is seen as fiction in this world. The most in-your-face part about this is mostly the enemies and monsters you fight throughout the game, which are commonly referred to as humans. Inversing both the term fantasy and reality, in my opinion, is a stroke of genius. I always believe that you can execute simple ideas that have been done before as long as there is a catch to what makes it stand out from the rest, and I think Metaphor does this to a T and not falling under generic fantasy. Humanity has taken thousands of years of evolving, growing, together as a human consciousness to accomplish these tasks and making what is considered fantasy a reality, or in this case, a utopia, one might say. As perfect as this fantasy novel may seem, there is one character that throws a wrench into this.
My name is Luis Guiaburn. I am the rightful king, he who will forge anew this unworthy country into a utopia. Attack in any number, wield any weapons, but fight with your very lives. If you live by a creed, show me its strength.
Luis, to me, is a top 3 Atlus villain and is probably one of my favorite gaming villains overall. His charisma and risk-taking and wanting to achieve his goals throughout the game makes it very interesting and wanting to know more about his plan, which is only given to you in chunks and not as clear as it may be. He hires the strong, regardless of race or tribe. He sees the potential in people to push them forward in order to fight along his side for the future. The caveat being that the weak would have to perish within the hundreds and thousands in a killed or be killed environment. Many people in Uchronia are already hostile towards those they deem lesser purely based off of race. Luis in this instance does not care about this and only wants the worthy to strive onwards and not be held by the weak as guidance. The church, hungry to gain power. Rella being the one that placed the curse upon the prince in many aspects as to why this whole journey is happening, doesn't really stem off the back of Luis. But it also brings into question that many of the corrupt people in the world would want to keep it the way it is. But the only two people striving to make this world better, per se, is you, the protagonist, and Luis, using two different methods with one same goal. I haven't mentioned this in the earlier section, but Luis carries the same book as the protagonist does throughout the story. So clearly Luis is aware of the contents inside, which in turn would make you realize what Luis's goal is. He's a very static character that we only see fleshed out as the game progresses, which is a huge change when it comes to antagonists in a lot of modern Atlus games. Mere existence in every scene just radiates his presence and unpredictability on what will he do next, which is why I praise the writing when it comes to sticking so close to their guns in terms of Luis just being the opposing sides of your own goal. I've always liked when Atlus had a protagonist and secondary character that reflects the opposite question of what the themes are. I know the word anxiety is thrown around a lot when it comes to dissecting metaphor, and while true that anxiety to make change is real, I do like the complexity in knowing how whichever goal gets accomplished by both parties, there's always going to be cracks showing in the progress. Only difference is Luis is a much more extreme method compared to yours, where his balance is more made out of strength, determination, and natural selection, or as Jargo puts it,
If he dies, he dies.
Meanwhile, the protagonist is more about helping people unite and make a change as a civilization where, despite human dissatisfaction, we continue as a society and not divided, living in a world where people fend for themselves and monsters roam the earth. This, in my opinion, is how Metaphor differs from Persona, where Persona more so delves into the human psychology of an individual, while Metaphor is more of the human consciousness as a species. This game reminded me about why I absolutely love Atlus as a developer. They make these games with such deep understanding and wanting to project onto others. If you don't believe me, I highly recommend the Persona 2 duology. Very thought-provoking, one might say. So in the end of the day, Metaphor to me isn't just another RPG that tries to be fantasy Persona, but it proves that Atlus taking this bold creative risk in developing their first fantasy RPG paid off. Its politically charged fantasy has always been very interesting to me, and its turn-based combat is up there with Shin Megami Tensei 5 as probably the most fun I've had in a turn-based game. Its deeply thematic storytelling presents the idea of innovation and tradition coexisting, but it also poses that question of humans being destined to never be fully satisfied. What makes it special isn't that it builds something entirely new, is the fact that Metaphor proves that it isn't afraid to evolve. The DNA of both Persona and Shin Megami Tensei are very much present here while also carving its own identity. It very much feels like a love letter to the 35-year history of the developer, since many aspects from Shin Megami Tensei to Etrian Odyssey are present here. Metaphor's writing really resonates with me very well. I feel as if this game and Clair Obscur have pushed the genre forward for the next decade now. It's why I continue to push for Metaphor to stay into the conversation when it comes to RPGs. I do not think that this game deserves to be just a moment in Atlus's history, but a fantasy that needs to live on.
Man, this guy has been yapping for way too long, but anyways, thank you guys for watching and staying till the end of the video. I'm going to be making another video coming out this week, which is going to be a little smaller than the one I just made. So, do be on the lookout for that. Metaphor's a great game. Please play it. Thank you, bye!